The emergency room's fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Olivia Bennett clutched her final paycheck, a meager sum that wouldn't even cover next month's rent. At 27, with nursing school debt piling up and her third job in 2 years, slipping away, she was beginning to think the universe had a personal vendetta against her. "You can't fire me for taking a sick day," Olivia protested, her voice cracking as she faced her now former supervisor at Boston General. "I had a 103-degree fever." Dr. Richards, a man whose bedside manner was as warm as an iceberg, barely looked up from his clipboard. "Hospital policy is quite clear, Ms. Bennett. 3 tardies equals 1 absence. You've accumulated enough of both to warrant termination." Olivia opened her mouth to argue further, but what was the point? She'd been working double shifts for weeks, covering for colleagues, sacrificing sleep and any semblance of a social life. Yet here she was, unemployed again, with $78 in her checking account, and rent due in 10 days. She trudged through the hospital corridors, the same halls where she'd provided compassionate care to countless patients. The irony wasn't lost on her. A nurse who could heal others but couldn't fix her own life. Outside, the April rain fell, in sheets, perfectly matching her mood. Of course, she'd forgotten her umbrella. She pulled her worn jacket tighter and prepared to make the long trek to the bus stop when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Olivia nearly ignored it. Probably another debt collector, but desperation made her answer. "Hello, Ms. Bennett?" A crisp, aristocratic voice greeted her. "This is Eleanor Montgomery. I understand you're currently seeking employment?" Olivia blinked in confusion. "Yes, but how did you—" "I have my resources," Eleanor cut in smoothly. "I require a private nurse for my son. The position includes room and board at our estate, plus a substantial salary." "Your estate?" Olivia repeated, wondering if this was some elaborate prank. "Montgomery Manor. Perhaps you've heard of it." Everyone in Massachusetts had heard of Montgomery Manor, a sprawling coastal estate belonging to one of the wealthiest families in America. The Montgomerys owned half the real estate in Boston and had more money than some small countries. Yes, of course," Olivia stammered. "My son William was in a tragic accident 3 months ago. He's in a coma, and I need someone with medical training to monitor his condition around the clock. Previous nurses have been—" Eleanor paused delicately. "Unsuitable." Olivia's mind raced. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. Unemployed nurses with maxed-out credit cards and a dying houseplant as their only dependent. "The position starts immediately," Eleanor continued. "A car can collect you within the hour if you accept." Rain dripped down Olivia's collar as thunder rumbled overhead. She thought of her cramped studio apartment, the leaky ceiling, the eviction notice that would surely come next week. "Ms. Bennett, are you still there?" "Yes," Olivia found herself saying. "Yes, I accept." Little did Olivia know that her impulsive decision would lead her not just to a job, but to a mansion filled with secrets, a family drowning in unspoken tragedies, and a comatose billionaire who would change her life forever. If only he would wake up. An hour later, Olivia sat in the back of a Bentley, her hastily packed suitcase beside her, watching the city fade into the distance. The chauffeur, an older gentleman named Higgins, occasionally glanced at her in the rearview mirror with an expression she couldn't quite read. "First time at the manor?" he finally asked. "Is it that obvious?" Olivia attempted a smile. "Most don't bring just one suitcase," he observed, his voice neutral, but his eyes kind. "Ms. Montgomery has gone through 7 nurses in 3 months." Olivia swallowed hard. 7? Why? Higgins met her eyes in the mirror again. "She's very particular about who cares for William, and the manor takes some getting used to." As they rounded a curve in the coastal road, Montgomery Manor appeared in the distance, a massive stone structure perched on a cliff overlooking the Atlantic, its turrets and spires silhouetted against the stormy sky. Gothic, imposing, and utterly intimidating. "Wow," Olivia breathed. Indeed, Higgins nodded. Welcome to your new home, Ms. Bennett. The car crunched along the gravel driveway, and Olivia felt a strange sensation, like she was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return, as if the universe had conspired to bring her here, to this place, at this exact moment. What she didn't know was just how right that feeling would prove to be. Eleanor Montgomery was nothing like Olivia had imagined. Instead of the warm, concerned mother she'd envisioned, Eleanor was a statuesque woman in her 60s, with silver, hair pulled into an immaculate chignon, wearing a Chanel suit that probably cost more than Olivia's entire education. You're younger than I expected, Eleanor observed coolly, circling Olivia as if inspecting merchandise. Your references speak highly of your medical expertise, though they failed to mention your appearance. Olivia shifted uncomfortably. In her hastily chosen outfit, black slacks and a simple blouse, she felt woefully underdressed amid the manor's opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, priceless art-adorned walls, and antique furniture that belonged in museums filled every corner. I assure you, Mrs. Montgomery, I'm fully qualified. Ms. Montgomery, she corrected sharply. I've been a widow for 12 years. Follow me. Olivia trailed Eleanor through corridors that seemed designed to confuse, past closed doors that practically whispered with secrets. Staff members, housekeepers, butlers, gardeners glimpsed through windows, averted their eyes as they passed. William's condition requires absolute consistency, Eleanor explained as they ascended a grand staircase. His room is kept at precisely 70 degrees. His physical therapy occurs at 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. daily. He receives visitors, myself included, only between 2 and 3 p.m. May I ask what caused the accident? Olivia ventured. Eleanor's pace faltered almost imperceptibly. Sailing incident. William has always been reckless. The doctors say there's minimal brain activity, but I know my son is still in there. Her voice hardened. The specialists have given up hope, but I haven't. That's why you're here. They reached the West Wing, where a set of double doors opened to reveal a hospital room disguised as a luxury suite. The latest medical equipment hummed softly, monitoring vital signs of the figure in the massive four-poster bed. And there he was, William Montgomery. Olivia had expected an elderly playboy, but the man before her couldn't have been more than 35. Dark hair contrasted against pale skin, his jawline strong even in unconsciousness. His features were striking, almost beautiful, marred only by a thin scar that traced from his left temple to his cheekbone. This is where you'll spend most of your time, Eleanor said, watching Olivia closely. Your quarters connect directly to his room. You'll have Sundays off, during which time Dr. Reynolds will cover. Any questions? 1,000, but Olivia only asked, has he shown any signs of waking? The occasional eye movement, slight changes in breathing patterns, nothing the doctors consider significant. Eleanor's expression revealed a flash of vulnerability before hardening again. I'll leave you to get acquainted with his case files. Dinner is at 7, though you'll typically eat here. With that, Eleanor swept from the room, leaving Olivia alone with the sleeping billionaire. So, Olivia murmured after ensuring she was truly alone. It's just you and me, Mr. Montgomery. She approached his bedside, checking his vitals out of professional habit. Everything was stable. Heart rate, oxygen levels, brain activity, minimal but present. She studied his face, noting the slight furrow between his brows that made him look troubled even in sleep. What are you dreaming about? She wondered aloud. Yacht races, stock portfolios, whatever it is, it doesn't look pleasant. Olivia settled into the chair beside his bed and opened his medical file. As she read through the extensive documentation, a picture emerged of a man who'd lived a life of extraordinary privilege and, if the tabloid clippings tucked in the back of the file were any indication, extraordinary recklessness. Photos showed William at charity galas, on the decks of massive yachts, skiing in the Alps, always with a different gorgeous woman on his arm, and always with the same distant look in his eyes. He smiled for the cameras, but never with them. Hours passed as Olivia absorbed his medical history, occasionally glancing at her sleeping patient. The sun set beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting the room in golden hues that softened the medical machinery's harsh edges. A soft knock interrupted her reading. "Come in," she called. A young woman entered, carrying a dinner tray. "I'm Charlotte, one of the kitchen staff," she said with a shy smile. "Ms. Montgomery said you'd be eating here." "Thank you, Charlotte." Olivia accepted the tray, roasted chicken with vegetables that smelled divine. "Have you worked here long?" Charlotte glanced nervously at the door. 3 years, since before the accident. She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "He wasn't always like this, you know. Mr. William. He used to laugh so much." "Really?" Olivia was surprised, given the brooding figure in the photographs. "Oh, yes. Before his father died, this house was different. There were parties, friends visiting." Charlotte's expression clouded. "Then Mr. Montgomery Sr. passed, and Ms. Eleanor changed. So did William." She shifted uncomfortably. "I shouldn't gossip. Enjoy your dinner, Ms. Bennett." After Charlotte left, Olivia ate while continuing to read William's file. The sailing accident had left him with severe head trauma and extensive injuries that had mostly healed during his 3 months unconscious. Medically speaking, there was no reason he shouldn't wake up. It was as if something was keeping him under. "What are you hiding from, William?" she asked the silent figure. Later, in her adjoining room, a luxurious suite that made her apartment look like a closet, Olivia unpacked her meager belongings and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. This job was nothing like she'd expected. The house felt weighted. With unspoken tensions, Eleanor was intimidating at best, and William was a mystery she couldn't help wanting to solve. As she drifted off to sleep that night, the sound of the ocean crashing against the cliffs below her window, Olivia had the strangest feeling that somewhere in the darkness, William Montgomery could hear her thoughts. She couldn't have known how right she was. By her 3rd day at Montgomery Manor, Olivia had developed a routine. She'd wake at dawn, check William's vitals, administer his medications, and then, this was her own addition, read to him from the books lining his impressive shelves. "Good morning, sunshine," she chirped, pulling back the heavy curtains to let the morning light stream in. "Another beautiful day you're missing." She checked his IV, noting with satisfaction that his color looked slightly better today. The medical side of her job was straightforward. It was the emotional weight of the enormous, eerily quiet mansion that was proving challenging. "So, I've noticed you have an impressive collection of first editions," she commented, scanning the bookshelves that lined one wall of his suite. "Very fancy. Very billionaire-y." Olivia had discovered that talking to William made the silence less oppressive. The doctors had mentioned that coma patients sometimes could hear, and besides, it helped her feel less alone in this strange house. Let's see. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Joyce, classic rich guy library. But wait, what's this? She pulled out a well-worn copy of The Princess Bride. Now this is interesting. Dog-eared pages, cracked spine. You actually read this one, didn't you? She settled into the chair beside his bed. My personal favorite. Mind if I read a bit? Over the past few days, she'd begun to notice small things about William that the medical charts didn't capture. How his breathing sometimes changed when she spoke. The way his fingers occasionally twitched when she adjusted his pillows. The bas-mauve slight furrow in his brow when Eleanor's sharp voice echoed from the hallway. When I was your age, television was called books. Olivia began reading, adopting different voices for each character. As she read, she found herself watching his face, searching for reactions. Was that a tiny smile at the Inigo Montoya lines? Did his eyelids flutter during the fire swamp scene? "Miss Bennet!" Olivia jumped, nearly dropping the book as Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her expression thunderous. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I was reading to him," Olivia stammered. "Studies show that sensory stimulation can help coma patients." "William detests that book," Eleanor cut in coldly. "And I don't recall story time being in your job description." "With all due respect, Ms. Montgomery," Olivia said, finding her courage. "Coma patients benefit from regular stimulation. Voices, touch, familiar stories. It can help create neural pathways that—" "I didn't hire you for your opinions on neurology," Eleanor interrupted. "Dr. Reynolds will be here at noon for William's examination. I expect a full report afterward." With that, she swept from the room, leaving a chill in her wake. "Wow," Olivia muttered after ensuring Eleanor was truly gone. "And I thought my mother was intense." She glanced at William. "For what it's worth, I think you do like this book. Your breathing changed during the sword fight scene." She could have sworn his lips twitched. Later that afternoon, following Dr. Reynolds' visit, a brisk affair during which the elderly physician barely acknowledged Olivia's presence, she was summoned to Eleanor's study. The room, like its occupant, was imposing. Dark mahogany, leather-bound books, and a desk that could have doubled as an aircraft carrier. "Dr. Reynolds informs me that William's condition remains unchanged," Eleanor stated without preamble. "Medically speaking, yes," Olivia agreed cautiously. "But I've noticed some responses to external stimuli that might—" "Spare me your optimism," Eleanor said sharply. "I've heard it all before. He's showing signs. Any day now. 3 months of false hope is quite enough." Olivia bit her lip, studying the older woman. Beneath the imperious facade, she glimpsed something else. The raw fear of a mother terrified of losing her son. "Have you considered that William might be choosing not to wake up?" Olivia asked gently. Eleanor's head snapped up. "What are you implying?" "Sometimes," Olivia explained, drawing on her hospital experience, "patients remain in comas because subconsciously, they're not ready to face whatever awaits them upon waking." "Absurd," Eleanor dismissed, though her voice lacked conviction. "What could William possibly fear? He has everything." "Everything except freedom," Olivia thought but didn't say. "I've arranged a neurology consult from Johns Hopkins next week," Eleanor continued, effectively ending the conversation. "Until then, please limit your storytelling." Back in William's room, Olivia found herself uncharacteristically irritated. "Your mother," she informed his sleeping form as she adjusted his pillows, "is the human equivalent of a migraine." She could have sworn his heart monitor beeped slightly faster, as if in agreement. "I shouldn't say that," she sighed, checking his IV. "She loves you. She's just showing it in the most controlling, suffocating way possible." Over the next few days, Olivia developed a system. When Eleanor was occupied with business calls or her weekly hair appointment, Olivia would close William's door and create what she privately called wake-up stimulus. She played his vinyl records, discovering his apparent fondness for classic rock. She described the weather, read newspaper headlines, and even sneaked in his favorite book, despite Eleanor's objections. "I brought something today," she told him on Saturday morning, pulling a small speaker from her pocket. "My emergency dance party kit. Every nurse needs one." She connected her phone and selected a playlist. The opening notes of Don't Stop Believin' filled the room. I know, totally cliché," she laughed, turning the volume to a respectable level. "But if this doesn't wake you up, nothing will." To her astonishment, her one-sided conversations had become the highlight of her days. She found herself sharing stories from her childhood, her nursing school disasters, even her spectacularly failed relationships. "And that's why I never date men who claim their spirit animal is a wolf," She concluded one such tale, arranging fresh flowers by his bedside. Lesson learned. By Sunday, her day off, Olivia was reluctant to leave the manor, despite Charlotte's encouragement to escape while you can. Instead, she spent the morning exploring the grounds, discovering gardens that belonged in a fairy tale and a path leading down to a private beach. She returned to find chaos at the manor. Servants rushed about, Eleanor barked orders, and a team of caterers transformed the formal dining room. "What's happening?" Olivia asked Charlotte, who was arranging flowers with frantic precision. "Sunday dinner," Charlotte whispered. "Ms. Eleanor hosts the board members every month. It's intense." "Board members?" "Montgomery Enterprises. They've been pressuring her about succession since Mr. Williams' accident." Charlotte glanced around nervously. "There's talk of removing him as heir if he doesn't recover soon." That evening, unable to sleep with the muffled sounds of the dinner party below, Olivia slipped into William's room to check on him. The moonlight cast his face in silver, making him look almost otherworldly. "Your mother's entertaining the vultures downstairs," she told him, adjusting his blanket. "Sounds like they're circling your inheritance." On impulse, she took his hand, something she'd done clinically dozens of times, but never like this, never holding it between both of hers. "I know we've technically just met," she said softly, "and you haven't exactly been chatty, but I think you should wake up now. Your life is slipping away while you sleep." She squeezed his hand gently. "Whatever you're hiding from, it can't be worse than losing everything, can it?" Maybe it was her imagination. Maybe it was the moonlight playing tricks. But for the briefest moment, she could have sworn William's fingers tightened around hers. And then, a flutter of eyelashes. A change in breathing. Olivia froze, her heart pounding. "William? Can you hear me?" Nothing. She leaned closer, watching intently, but his features had settled back into stillness. The moment, if it had even been real, had passed. With a sigh, Olivia reluctantly released his hand and moved toward the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at the sleeping figure bathed in moonlight. "Sweet dreams, billionaire boy. I'll be back tomorrow." What she didn't see, as she closed the door behind her, was William Montgomery's finger twitching against the sheets, reaching for a hand that was no longer there. "I think he squeezed my hand," Olivia insisted, trailing after Dr. Reynolds as he prepared to leave following his Tuesday morning examination. The elderly physician sighed, adjusting his bow tie with practiced precision. "Ms. Bennett, I understand your enthusiasm, but William Montgomery has shown no significant change in neural activity for 3 months. But I felt it," she pressed. "And last night I swear his eyelids fluttered." Dr. Reynolds gave her a look that managed to be both patronizing and pitying. The human mind is remarkably adept at seeing what it wishes to see. "I've been practicing medicine since before you were born, young lady. Trust me when I say that premature optimism only leads to disappointment." "With all due respect," Olivia countered, her nurse's training overcoming her natural deference to authority. "I spend 12 hours a day with him. I've noticed patterns, responses to certain stimuli, changes in his breathing when I read to him or play music." "Involuntary reflexes," Dr. Reynolds dismissed, snapping his medical bag shut with finality. "Ms. Montgomery hired you to provide care, not false hope." After he left, Olivia returned to William's room, frustration evident in her brisk movements as she adjusted his pillows. "Your doctor," she informed William's sleeping form, "has the bedside manner of a cactus and the imagination of a brick." She checked his vitals, noting that his heart rate seemed slightly elevated. "See? You agree with me." For 2 weeks now, Olivia had been cataloging every possible response from William. The subtle changes in his breathing, the occasional finger twitch, the way his heart rate increased when she entered the room in the morning. None of it was conclusive enough to convince Dr. Reynolds or Eleanor, but Olivia was becoming increasingly certain William Montgomery was in there, listening. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" she accused good-naturedly, adjusting his IV. "Pulling a Sleeping Beauty act to avoid board meetings and charity galas? I've seen your calendar from before the accident. You had 3 fundraisers in one weekend. I'd fake a coma, too." She was halfway through changing his sheets, a task she insisted on doing herself despite the house staff's protests, when the door opened. Expecting Eleanor's daily inspection, Olivia straightened, prepared for criticism about the fresh flowers she'd brought in against the matriarch's wishes. Instead, a tall man with William's jawline but none of his charm stood in the doorway, eyeing her with undisguised interest. "Well, well," he drawled, leaning against the doorframe. "You must be the new nurse Mother mentioned." She failed to note certain attributes. Olivia resisted the urge to pull her scrubs tighter. "You must be James, William's brother. Half-brother, according to Charlotte's whispered gossip." The result of Eleanor's husband's brief affair, raised reluctantly by Eleanor after his mother abandoned him, and, if the tabloids tucked into William's medical file were accurate, a notorious playboy with a gambling problem. "My reputation precedes me," James smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "And you are?" "Olivia Bennett. I'm responsible for William's care." James entered the room fully, circling the bed to study his comatose brother. Unlike Eleanor, whose visits were marked by stiff formality and careful distance, James stood uncomfortably, close to William, scrutinizing him like a specimen. "Any change?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "Some promising responses," Olivia replied carefully, noting how William's heart monitor had picked up its pace since James entered. "Small, but significant." James laughed, the sound sharp and disbelieving. 3 months playing Sleeping Beauty, and Mother still believes he'll wake up and save the company. He shook his head. "Meanwhile, I'm actually running things while William gets all the credit for simply existing." Olivia busied herself with straightening William's blankets, uncomfortable with James's bitterness. "I understand the board meeting went well on Sunday." James's eyes narrowed. "Eavesdropping, Ms. Bennett?" "News travels in this house," she replied evenly. "Indeed." James smiled again, this time with calculated charm. "Perhaps you'd join me for dinner tonight. The staff dining room must be terribly dull, and I could use some fresh perspective on my brother's condition." Before Olivia could formulate a polite rejection, William's heart monitor emitted a sudden, sharp beep, a noticeable spike in rhythm. Both Olivia and James turned toward the unconscious man. For a breathless moment, Olivia thought she saw William's eyelids twitch. "Just an anomaly," James said dismissively, though his eyes remained fixed on his brother's face. "Happens all the time, I'm sure." "Actually, it's the first time today," Olivia countered, moving closer to check William's pupils. No response, but his pulse was definitely faster. "His body often reacts to voices." "How fascinating." James's tone suggested it was anything but. He checked his Rolex, a flashier, gaudier version of the vintage timepiece on William's wrist. "About dinner?" "I appreciate the offer, but I'm on duty until 8, Olivia replied, deliberately misunderstanding. "Perhaps another time." James's smile thinned. "I'll hold you to that, Nurse Bennett." He cast one last, almost calculating look at his brother before departing. Once the door closed, Olivia exhaled. "Well, that was uncomfortable," she told William. "Your brother has all the subtlety of a freight train." She checked his pulse again, finding it had returned to normal. "Not a fan, I take it. That makes 2 of us." That evening, Charlotte delivered Olivia's dinner tray with a conspiratorial smile. "Mr. James asked about you," she whispered. "Wanted to know if you were single." Olivia rolled her eyes, accepting the tray. Fantastic. Be careful, Charlotte warned. He's persistent, especially with staff he finds interesting. Noted, Olivia replied dryly. Any other Montgomery family secrets I should know about? Charlotte hesitated, glancing at Williams. Still form. There's more to Mr. William than what the tabloids say. Before the accident, he was working on something big, something that made Ms. Eleanor furious. What kind of something? I don't know exactly, Charlotte admitted. But there were arguments. Ms. Eleanor would mention betraying the family legacy, and Mr. James was involved somehow. She shrugged apologetically. Staff gossip. Take it with a grain of salt. After Charlotte left, Olivia settled into the chair, beside William's bed with her dinner tray. So, more family drama, she mused. What were you up to that got everyone so worked up? As had become her habit, she shared her meal with him. Not literally, of course, but describing each bite of the ridiculously gourmet food that appeared on her tray each day. Tonight we have poached salmon with dill sauce, she narrated. The sauce is slightly too lemony, but the fish is perfect. The asparagus is, well, it's asparagus. No one's ever been excited about asparagus in the history of vegetables. She could have sworn his lips twitched. When you wake up, what's the first thing you want to eat? She asked, spearing a roasted potato. Probably not hospital food. Maybe a burger? You strike me as a secret fast food lover. All you billionaires are under your foie gras exteriors. After dinner, Olivia continued her evening routine. She checked William's vitals, performed his range of motion exercises, and prepared his medications for the night nurse who covered the brief hours when Olivia actually slept. You know, she said conversationally as she worked, I've told you all about my disastrous love life, my student loans, and my unhealthy addiction to reality baking shows. It's only fair you share something in return. She paused in adjusting his blankets, studying his face. The strong jawline softened slightly by 3 months of inactivity, the dark lashes against pale cheeks, the slight furrow between his brows that never fully disappeared, even in sleep. What are you thinking about in there? She wondered aloud. Are you dreaming? Can you hear me at all? On impulse, she reached out and smoothed the perpetual worry line between his brows with her thumb. The touch was gentle, intimate in a way that surprised even her. William's breathing changed, became slightly faster, less even. Olivia froze, her hand still resting lightly on his forehead. William, can you hear me? The monitors showed an increase in brain activity, subtle but definitely there. Heart pounding. Olivia pressed the call button for Dr. Reynolds, then leaned closer to William. If you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand. She slipped her hand into his larger one, holding her breath. Nothing. Then, so faint she almost missed, it at pressure against her fingers, the barest tightening of his hand around hers. Oh my God, she whispered, tears springing to her eyes. You're in there, I knew it. The door flew open, and Eleanor burst in, followed by a harried-looking Dr. Reynolds. What's happened? She demanded, her normally perfect composure slipping. He squeezed my hand, Olivia reported, reluctant to let go but stepping aside for the doctor. Definite response to verbal commands, and look at the EEG, increased activity in the frontal lobe. Dr. Reynolds examined the readings, his expression skeptical, but no longer dismissive. Interesting, he murmured, shining a penlight into William's eyes. Pupillary responses slightly improved. Is he waking up? Eleanor asked, a tremor in her usually steady voice. Too early to say, Dr. Reynolds hedged, but these are encouraging signs. Eleanor's gaze locked on Olivia, reassessing her, as if seeing her for the first time. What were you doing when this happened? Heat rose to Olivia's cheeks. She could hardly admit she'd been caressing her patient's face. Just talking to him, asking him questions. Continue whatever you're doing, Eleanor ordered, an unreadable expression crossing her features. If William is finally responding, we must capitalize on it. Later that night, after Eleanor and Dr. Reynolds had gone, the latter promising to return first thing in the morning, Olivia found herself alone with William once more. The excitement had subsided, and he'd shown no further responses. But the atmosphere in the room had changed. There was hope now. Tangible, measurable hope. "You're quite the drama queen," she told him fondly, adjusting his blankets one last time before her. Shift ended. "Deciding to wake up just when your brother was hitting on me. Coincidence? I think not." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Keep fighting, William. Whatever's keeping you under, it's not stronger than you are." On impulse, she pressed a light kiss to his forehead, a gesture she would have justified as therapeutic. Touch if anyone had questioned it, but which felt like something else entirely. "Sweet dreams," she murmured. "I'll be here when you wake up. Promise." As she turned to leave, the lights from the monitors casting her shadow long across the floor, she didn't see William's eyelids flutter open for the briefest moment. Didn't see him watching her silhouette as she paused at the doorway. Didn't hear the softest exhale, almost but not quite her name, before his eyes closed again. But somewhere, in the space between sleeping and waking, William Montgomery was finally fighting his way back. Olivia burst through the manor's front doors, her hair wind-blown from the convertible Higgins had insisted on driving with the top down. "Sorry I'm late," she called, rushing toward the grand staircase. The pharmacy was backed up with... She froze mid-sentence. The entrance hall was filled with people. Doctors in white coats, nurses she didn't recognize, and Eleanor Montgomery holding court in the center, looking more animated than Olivia had ever seen her. "Ms. Bennett," Eleanor called sharply. "How good of you to join us." Olivia approached cautiously. "What's happening?" "William showed increased brain activity overnight," Eleanor explained, unable to fully suppress her excitement. Dr. Reynolds called in specialists from Boston General. Olivia's heart leapt. "That's wonderful. What?" "Dr. Sharma will be taking over William's primary care," Eleanor continued, gesturing to a distinguished-looking woman in an impeccable lab coat. "She's the leading neurologist in the Northeast." Olivia's smile faltered. "Taking over? But You'll continue your duties, of course," Eleanor said dismissively. "Dr. Sharma simply requires additional support staff." Before Olivia could respond, a commotion erupted from upstairs. A nurse Olivia didn't recognize appeared at the top of the staircase, her expression urgent. "He's moving," she called down. "Definite voluntary movement." The entrance hall erupted in controlled chaos. As the medical team rushed upstairs, Eleanor at their heels, Olivia found herself swept along, clutching the pharmacy bag containing William's medications. Medications she was no longer authorized to administer, apparently. William's room had transformed overnight into a full-fledged medical unit. New, monitoring equipment crowded the space, and unfamiliar faces surrounded his bed, blocking Olivia's view. "Excuse me," she murmured, trying to push forward. No one moved. She was suddenly invisible, just another nurse in a sea of more qualified specialists. Dr. Sharma's authoritative voice cut through the murmurs. "Pupillary response improving. Definite reaction to painful stimuli. Mr. Montgomery, if you can hear me, squeeze my hand." Olivia held her breath, straining to see over shoulders and between bodies. "Good," Dr. Sharma said, satisfaction evident in her tone. "Again, please." Eleanor's sharp intake of breath was audible even from where Olivia stood. "William?" The name came out as a question, fragile with hope. Olivia finally managed to edge forward enough to see William's face. His eyelids were fluttering, his fingers twitching against the sheets. The perpetual furrow between his brows had deepened, as if he were concentrating intensely. "Remarkable improvement overnight," Dr. Reynolds commented, sounding both pleased and slightly bewildered. "I've never seen such a rapid change in coma recovery patterns." "What did you do differently last night?" Dr. Sharma asked, addressing the room at large. "Nothing," replied the night nurse, looking slightly intimidated by the assembled expertise. "Standard protocols. The only unusual thing was—" She hesitated, glancing at Olivia. "Yes?" Dr. Sharma prompted. "He kept saying something. A name, I think, around 3 a.m. Eleanor stepped closer to the bed. "What name?" The night nurse looked uncomfortable. "I couldn't make it out clearly. Sounded like—" "Olivia?" All eyes turned to Olivia, who felt heat rise to her face. Eleanor's expression was unreadable, but her eyes had narrowed slightly. "Ms. Bennett has been implementing some unconventional therapeutic approaches," Dr. Reynolds explained delicately. "I've just been talking to him," Olivia defended. "Reading, playing music, standard sensory stimulation techniques." Dr. Sharma looked intrigued. "Approach the bed, please, Ms. Bennett." Heart pounding, Olivia stepped forward until she stood beside William. Up close, the changes were even more apparent. His color had improved, and the machines showed heightened brain activity. "Speak to him," Dr. Sharma instructed, "as you normally would." Acutely aware of the many eyes upon her, Olivia hesitated. Her conversations with William had been private, often silly, occasionally veering into personal territory. How could she replicate that with an audience? Good morning, William," she began awkwardly. "Quite the crowd you've drawn today. Very dramatic of you." "Nothing. Perhaps something more stimulating?" Dr. Sharma suggested. Olivia took a deep breath and leaned closer, lowering her voice slightly. "Hey, billionaire boy. Remember our deal? You were supposed to wake up so I could find out if I've been imagining that sense of humor I'm pretty sure you have." William's eyelids fluttered, more rapidly. "That's it," she encouraged, forgetting the audience now. "I've been carrying this conversation for weeks. Your turn to talk." His fingers twitched, then curled, a definite grasping motion. "Hand," Dr. Sharma instructed tersely. Olivia slipped her hand into William's. Almost immediately, his fingers closed around hers, weakly but unmistakably intentional. "William?" Eleanor's voice broke slightly on her son's name. "Can you hear us?" A moment of stillness then. So gradually it seemed to happen in slow motion. William Montgomery opened his eyes. The room collectively held its breath. William blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused, then gradually sharpening. His eyes moved around the room, taking in the crowd of strangers, the medical equipment, his mother's tear-streaked face. Then his gaze found Olivia, and something changed in his expression. Recognition, relief, and something else Olivia couldn't quite name. His lips parted. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp emerged. "Water," Dr. Sharma ordered, and someone rushed to comply. After a few sips through a straw, William tried again. His voice, when it finally came, was hoarse from disuse, but unmistakably clear. "You're real." The words were directed at Olivia, accompanied by a slight squeeze of her hand that sent an inexplicable thrill through her. "Very real," she confirmed, smiling through sudden tears. "Welcome back." The next hours passed in a blur of medical evaluations, tearful maternal hovering, Eleanor's version of it anyway, and continuous monitoring. William drifted in and out of consciousness. Normal for someone emerging from a prolonged coma, Dr. Sharma assured them. But each time he woke, his eyes sought Olivia. By evening, the crowd had dispersed somewhat. Dr. Sharma had established a monitoring schedule with her team. Eleanor had reluctantly retired to make some calls, and Olivia found herself briefly alone with a now-awake William. He studied her with an intensity that made her self-conscious. "You were in my dreams," he said, his voice stronger now, but still rough around the edges. Olivia busied herself adjusting his IV. "That's common with coma patients. External stimuli. Get incorporated into—" "No," William interrupted. "Before that, I knew your voice before you started reading to me. Before Princess Bride." Olivia stilled. "That's not possible. We never met before your accident." William frowned, the familiar furrow between his brows deepening. "You kept telling me to wake up, that I was missing everything." His gaze was searching, almost desperate. "You promised you'd be here when I did." A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Those were indeed her exact words, spoken when she thought he couldn't really hear her. "I meant it," she said softly. Something in his expression eased. "The others treat me like I'm made of glass, or like I'm still unconscious." A hint of a smile touched his lips. "You called me Billionaire Boy." Olivia winced. "Sorry about that. Probably not very professional." "Don't be professional," William said with unexpected firmness. "Everyone else is suffocating me with professionalism." He glanced toward the door. "My mother has already mapped out my recovery schedule. Board, meetings by video conference next week, physical therapy twice daily, press statement being drafted as we speak." "You just woke up from a 3-month coma," Olivia pointed out. "Maybe a day off is in order?" The smile that spread across William's face transformed him from merely handsome to breathtaking. "Exactly what I was thinking." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Sharma and her team for evening evaluations. Olivia stepped back, once again relegated to the sidelines as the specialists assessed William's remarkable progress. "Extraordinary recovery. Speed," Dr. Sharma noted, making entries on her tablet. "Mr. Montgomery, can you tell me the last thing you remember before the accident?" William's expression clouded. "I was on my boat, arguing with James about something important." He frowned. "It's fuzzy. Memory gaps are normal," Dr. Sharma assured him. "They may fill in over time, or they may not." "The company," William said suddenly, his expression clearing. "We were arguing about what to do with the company." From the doorway, Eleanor's voice cut in. "That's enough excitement for one day, I think." She entered, perfectly composed once more. "William needs rest." Dr. Sharma nodded. "Quite right. Mr. Montgomery, we'll continue testing tomorrow. For now, sleep is the best medicine." As the medical team filed out, Eleanor approached her son's bedside, her expression softening in a way Olivia had never witnessed. "You gave us quite a scare, William." "Sorry, Mother," he replied, and Olivia was struck by how quickly he shifted. From the man who had joked with her moments ago to a more formal, restrained version of himself. Eleanor brushed an invisible piece of lint from his blanket. "James will be delighted to hear you're awake. He's been managing things admirably in your absence. But of course, everyone will be relieved to have you back at the helm soon." Something flickered in William's eyes. "James has been running the company?" "Someone had to," Eleanor replied. "The board was getting restless. But that's a conversation for another day." She patted his hand stiffly. "Rest now." After Eleanor departed, Olivia approached to check William's vitals one last time before her shift ended. He caught her wrist as she reached for the blood pressure cuff. "She's lying," he said quietly. "About what?" "I don't know yet, but something's wrong." His grip on her wrist tightened slightly. "Don't let them push you out. I need someone I can trust." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "You barely know me." "I've been listening to you for weeks," he countered. "You're the only real thing in this place." Before Olivia could respond, the door opened again, and the nurse entered, a different one from the previous night, Olivia noted with disappointment. "Time for your medications, Mr. Montgomery," the woman announced cheerfully. William released Olivia's wrist reluctantly. "Will you be back tomorrow?" he asked, an edge of vulnerability in his voice that made her heart twist. "First thing in the morning," Olivia promised. "Try not to fall into another coma overnight. The paperwork would be a nightmare." There it was again, that genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "I'll do my best, Nurse Bennett." As Olivia left the room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. For weeks, she'd been caring for an unconscious man, developing feelings she'd dismissed as one-sided and inappropriate. But now William was awake and looking at her like she was a lifeline in a storm. And somewhere between his smile and the way he'd said her name, Olivia realized she was in serious trouble. Because falling for your billionaire coma patient was bad enough, falling for him after he woke up was infinitely more dangerous. By the time Olivia arrived the following morning, Montgomery Manor was buzzing with activity. Staff hustled about with renewed purpose. Reporters gathered at the gates, held at bay by formidable security, and the medical team occupied an entire wing of the second floor, converted overnight into a rehabilitation center. "Good morning," Olivia greeted Charlotte, who was balancing a breakfast tray while attempting to dodge a team of technicians installing new equipment. "Isn't it?" Charlotte beamed. "The whole house feels different, lighter somehow, like everyone can finally breathe again." Olivia understood perfectly. William's awakening had transformed the manor's atmosphere from mausoleum to merely mansion, still imposing, but no longer oppressive. She made her way to William's suite, only to find Eleanor and Dr. Sharma deep in conversation outside the door. They fell silent as she approached. "Ah, Ms. Bennett," Eleanor said coolly. "Perfect timing. We've been discussing staff reorganization now that William has awakened." Olivia's stomach clenched. "Reorganization?" "Dr. Sharma's team will handle William's medical needs moving forward," Eleanor explained, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Your nursing skills, while adequate for a comatose patient, aren't specialized enough for neurorehabilitation." "I see," Olivia said carefully, trying to mask her disappointment and hurt. After weeks of dedicated care, she was being discarded now that William was conscious. Typical Montgomery efficiency. "However," Eleanor continued, surprising her, "William has specifically requested that you remain part of his care team in a different capacity." Olivia blinked. "Different capacity?" "Personal assistant," Eleanor clarified, looking as if the words tasted faintly unpleasant. "He seems to find your presence comforting. Dr. Sharma agrees that maintaining psychological comfort is important during recovery." Olivia glanced at Dr. Sharma, who offered a small conspiratorial smile. "Studies show that coma patients often form strong attachments to consistent caregivers during their unconscious period," she explained. "In layman's terms, Mr. Montgomery trusts you." "The position includes a substantial raise," Eleanor added, as if money were the only possible motivation Olivia could have for wanting to stay. "You'll be responsible for managing William's daily schedule, accompanying him to therapy sessions, and facilitating his reintegration into his professional responsibilities." Translation: babysitting duty, Olivia thought. Still, if it meant staying close to William. "I'd be happy to help in any way I can," she said sincerely. Eleanor nodded briskly. "Excellent. William is expecting you." Her gaze sharpened. "One more thing, Ms. Bennett. Now that my son is conscious, certain, boundaries must be observed. William is not just a patient, but the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation and the heir to the Montgomery legacy. Professional distance is paramount." The warning was unmistakable. don't get ideas. Of course, Olivia agreed, her expression neutral despite the flush creeping up her neck. I understand completely. When she entered William's room, she found him sitting up in bed, looking remarkably improved despite less than 24 hours of consciousness. His color was better, his eyes alert, and someone had given him a haircut and a shave, erasing the castaway look he'd sported during his coma. "There you are," he said, his face brightening in a way that made Olivia's heart perform a gymnastic routine. "I was beginning to think you'd abandoned ship." "Just navigating stormy seas," she replied, gesturing vaguely toward the door where Eleanor had been standing. "Your mother has relegated me to personal assistant status." William's smile turned mischievous. "I may have suggested that. Sorry." "You suggested demoting me?" Olivia asked, raising an eyebrow as she approached his bedside. "I suggested keeping you close," he corrected. "The medical team was trying to push you out entirely. This was the compromise." "Well, thank you, I think," Olivia said, surprised by his forethought and touched by his desire to keep her nearby. "How are you feeling today? Besides manipulative, apparently." William laughed, a rich, genuine sound that Olivia realized she'd been waiting weeks to hear. "Better than I have any right to, according to the battalion of specialists. Apparently, I'm something of a medical miracle." "Stubbornness has its benefits," Olivia agreed, instinctively checking the monitors beside his bed despite no longer being responsible for his medical care. "I hear I have you to thank for that," William said more softly. "Dr. Sharma says you refused to give up on me when everyone else had." Olivia shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "I just talked to you. Maybe read some very highbrow literature." She gestured to the dog-eared copy of The Princess Bride still on his nightstand. "You did more than that," William said, his gaze intent. "You reached me when no one else could." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Olivia wasn't ready to name. She cleared her throat. "So, what does a billionaire's personal assistant do exactly? Fetch designer coffee? Screen calls from supermodels?" William's expression clouded slightly. "My mother has a specific vision, I'm sure. Board meetings via video conference, carefully controlled press interactions, gradual return to normal, her version of it anyway." "And what's your vision?" Olivia asked, recognizing the same restlessness she'd sensed in him even during his coma. William's gaze drifted to the window, where beyond the manicured gardens, the ocean stretched endlessly. "Freedom," he said simply. Then, with a visible effort, he shook off the melancholy. "But first I need answers. Something happened before. My accident, something important. And I can't remember all of it. The doctor said memory gaps are normal. This isn't a medical issue," William interrupted. "It's deliberate. James and my mother are hiding something." Olivia sat on the edge of his bed. Professional boundaries be damned. "What makes you say that?" "The way they look at each other when they think I'm not watching. The whispered conversations that stop when I notice. And there's a project I was working on, something that made my mother furious." His brow furrowed in frustration. "I just can't remember what it was." "Maybe I can help," Olivia suggested. "I've been here for weeks, the staff talk." William's expression brightened. "Perfect. My mother won't suspect you of snooping." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Start with my office. 3rd floor, East Wing. There should be files there. Paperwork about Montgomery Enterprises." "Breaking and entering wasn't in my job description," Olivia protested half-heartedly. "Consider it your first official assignment as my personal assistant," William replied with a hint of that devastating smile. Before Olivia could respond, the door opened, and James sauntered in, dressed impeccably in a suit that screamed old money despite his nouveau riche attitude. "Well, well, Sleeping Beauty awakens," James announced with theatrical flair. The prodigal son returns to reclaim his throne. James, William acknowledged, his voice noticeably cooler. I hear you've been keeping my seat warm. Someone had to stop the ship from sinking, James replied, his smile not reaching his eyes. Mother's been beside herself, the board in chaos, stock prices plummeting, all because you decided to take an extended nap. Olivia rose from the bed, feeling the tension crackling between the brothers. I should give you two some privacy. No, need, William said, his gaze never leaving James. My brother was just leaving. I'm sure he has a hostile takeover to plan somewhere. James laughed, the sound sharp-edged. Always so dramatic, William. I've been protecting your interests, not undermining them, though the board may have different ideas about leadership going forward. Is that a threat? William asked mildly, though Olivia could see his knuckles whitening against the blanket. James shrugged elegantly. Merely an observation. You've been gone a long time, brother. Things have evolved. His gaze shifted to Olivia, turning speculative. Ms. Bennet, looking lovely as always. I see you've secured yourself a new position now that your patient is responsive. The insinuation made Olivia bristle. Yes, apparently I'm good at waking sleeping billionaires. You should add it to my resume. William's unexpected bark of laughter broke the tension. James's smile thinned dangerously. Well, I'll leave you two to your professional relationship. He moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, William, Mother's arranged a video conference with the board for tomorrow. Just a quick appearance to assure them you're on the mend. No pressure. After James departed, William released a long breath. And that's why I need your help. My loving brother has been running my company for 3 months, and suddenly I'm supposed to believe he's eager to hand it back? Maybe he really did just keep things running while you recovered, Olivia suggested, though she didn't believe it herself. William shook his head. The last conversation I remember before the accident was an argument with James about the foundation. Though, the Montgomery Foundation? Olivia asked. The family's charitable organization was legendary, funding everything from medical research to urban development. I wanted to redirect the foundation's resources, William said slowly, the memory seemingly returning in pieces. More direct impact, less tax shelter. James was furious, said I was betraying our father's legacy. Would that affect James's position? It would affect his wallet, William said grimly. The foundation's structure allows certain creative, financial arrangements that benefit the board members. Changing it would cost James millions. Olivia frowned. You think he had something to do with your accident? William looked troubled. I don't know. But I need to find out what's happened to the foundation while I've been unconscious. The next day unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. William had physical therapy in the morning, followed by cognitive assessments and a brief, carefully controlled meeting with Dr. Sharma's team. Through it all, Olivia remained by his side, taking notes, managing his schedule, and watching for signs of fatigue that William stubbornly refused to acknowledge. By afternoon, she'd managed to slip away long enough to locate William's office, a handsomely appointed room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a massive oak desk overlooking the ocean. The door was locked, but Charlotte had helpfully mentioned that a spare key was kept for emergencies in the library's desk drawer. Heart-pounding, Olivia let herself in, half expecting alarms to sound or Eleanor to materialize from behind a curtain. The office was undisturbed, a layer of dust suggesting no one had entered in months. She headed straight for the desk, rifling through drawers until she found a folder labeled Foundation Restructuring. Inside were detailed plans to transform the Montgomery Foundation from a traditional charity into something more radical, a direct service organization that would distribute 90% of its assets to community projects over the next 5 years. Attached was a memo from James, scathingly critical of the plan, warning it would destroy our father's legacy and bankrupt the family within a decade. So this was what they'd been fighting about. William wanted to give away the family fortune, and James... Find anything interesting? Olivia nearly jumped out of her skin. Eleanor Montgomery stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. I was just... Olivia stammered, caught red-handed. Looking for something at William's request, Eleanor finished for her. Yes, I assumed as much. My son never could leave well enough alone. To Olivia's surprise, Eleanor entered the office and closed the door behind her, then gestured to the chairs by the window. Sit, Miss Bennett. It seems we need to have a conversation. Feeling like a schoolgirl caught cheating, Olivia obeyed, the folder still clutched in her hands. William believes someone tried to kill him, Eleanor stated matter-of-factly. Doesn't he? Olivia blinked, caught off guard by the directness. He has questions about his accident, Eleanor sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 60-plus years. My son has always had a flair for the dramatic. The truth is far more mundane. William was drunk the night of his accident. He'd had another argument with James about that. She nodded toward the folder. His ridiculous plan to dismantle our family's legacy. He took the boat out despite the weather warnings. Pure recklessness. Why didn't you tell him that when he woke up? Olivia asked. Because his doctors advised against it, Eleanor replied. Trauma, memory loss. They said to let him remember gradually. And frankly, I was hoping he'd forgotten that self-destructive crusade entirely. Olivia studied the older woman carefully. You don't support his plans for the foundation? The foundation is what remains of my husband's vision, Eleanor said, her voice hardening. William wants to throw it away on some misguided idealism. He doesn't understand that wealth requires careful stewardship. Maybe he just wants to make a difference in a more direct way, Olivia suggested. Eleanor's laugh was brittle. My dear, the Montgomerys have made a difference for generations. We endow universities, fund medical research, preserve cultural institutions. What William proposes is charity. She made the word sound distasteful. What about James? Olivia pressed. William says he was angry about the changes. James understands family duty, Eleanor said simply. He protects what William would squander. The pieces were coming together in Olivia's mind. Not a murder attempt, perhaps, but certainly a power struggle. William unconscious had been convenient for those opposing his vision. The board meeting is in an hour, Eleanor continued, rising. William will make a brief appearance, reassure everyone he's recovering, and announce that James will continue as acting CEO during his rehabilitation. Her gaze sharpened. You will encourage him to focus on his health rather than business. Matters, is that clear? The implied threat was unmistakable. Play along or lose your place here. Crystal clear? Olivia agreed, though inwardly she was already planning how to tell William everything. She didn't have to wait long. When she returned to William's room, she found him dressed in a suit for the video conference, looking more like the billionaire CEO from the photographs and less like her patient. You found something? He said immediately, reading her expression. Olivia handed him the folder. Your mother caught me. She says you were drunk the night of your accident, that it was recklessness, not foul play. William scanned the documents, his expression darkening. And you believe her? I believe there's a lot at stake, Olivia replied carefully. This plan of yours would change everything for your family, for the foundation. It would threaten James's position, your mother's vision. My father's legacy, William finished, his voice bitter. That's all they care about, preserving the Montgomery name, the Montgomery fortune. He looked up at her, his eyes intense. Do you know why I created this plan? Olivia shook her head. Because I visited one of our charitable projects last year, affordable housing the foundation had funded. Except it wasn't affordable at all. The developers had taken our money and built luxury condos with a few token low-income units that no one working minimum wage could possibly afford. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We weren't helping anyone except wealthy developers and our own tax accountants. I wanted to change that. Direct funding to community organizations, participatory grant-making where people actually affected by issues decide how money gets spent. And James and your mother opposed it, Olivia guessed. James called it bleeding heart, socialism. William confirmed with a grim smile. My mother said I was dismantling everything my father built. He stood, moving to the window with only a slight unsteadiness. 3 days conscious, and already his physical recovery was remarkable. I wasn't drunk the night of the accident, he said quietly. I never drink when I sail. Never. The video conference was minutes away. Olivia could see the conflict in William's face. Go along with his mother's narrative or challenge it, and potentially lose control of the company he hoped to transform. What are you going to do? She asked. William turned to her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. What would you do? Me? Olivia was startled by the question. I'm just a nurse from Dorchester with student loans and a dying. Vern, what do I know about billion-dollar foundations? You know about helping people, William said simply. That's all I'm trying to do. In that moment, looking at him, not the billionaire, not the patient, but the man who'd fought his way back from darkness with a vision of doing something that mattered, Olivia knew she was in love with William Montgomery. Not his wealth, or his status, but his heart. Then do it, she said firmly. Tell the truth. Fight for what you believe in. You didn't wake up from a 3-month coma to play it safe. William's slow smile was like sunrise. No, he agreed softly. I didn't. He stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance she'd maintained since his awakening. I woke up for you. Before Olivia could process those words, he'd closed the final distance between them, his hands cradling her face as he kissed her. Gently at first, then with increasing certainty as she responded. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, William rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since I opened my eyes. That long, huh? Olivia teased, her heart racing. Longer, he admitted. I dreamed about you, remember? A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Charlotte peeked in, her eyes widening slightly at their proximity before she schooled her expression. The video conference is ready, Mr. Montgomery. Everyone's waiting. William straightened, his hand finding Olivia's and squeezing it once before releasing it. Thank you, Charlotte. As Charlotte retreated, William turned back to Olivia. Come with me? Professional distance, remember? She reminded him, though she couldn't stop smiling. To hell with professional distance, William declared. I need someone I trust beside me. The video conference was being held in the Manor's library, transformed into a makeshift boardroom. Eleanor and James were already there, along with a tech team managing the large screen where a dozen faces, the Montgomery Enterprises Board of Directors, waited expectantly. Eleanor's eyes narrowed at the sight of William and Olivia entering together, but she said nothing, merely gesturing William to the seat at the head of the table. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed the screen. As promised, William has joined us briefly to update you on his recovery. William sat, his posture straight, despite the weeks of muscle atrophy he was still overcoming. Olivia remained standing just behind his chair, a silent show of support. Thank you, Mother, William said, smoothly. Members of the board, as you can see, reports of my demise were greatly exaggerated. Polite laughter rippled through the screen. My recovery is progressing well, William continued, his voice gaining strength. And I anticipate resuming my full duties as CEO within the month. James shifted in his seat, and Eleanor's smile froze. However, William added, I understand my brother has been managing operations in my absence, and I'm grateful for his dedication. Relief visibly flowed through Eleanor. James smirked. Which is why, William continued, I've decided to make some changes to our leadership structure. The smirk vanished from James's face. Effective immediately, James will be appointed president of Montgomery Properties, our real estate division. This will allow me to focus on a project I began before my sabbatical, the complete restructuring of the Montgomery Foundation. Gasps and murmurs erupted from the screen. Eleanor's face had gone pale. James half rose from his seat, then thought better of it. William, Eleanor began warningly. This is hardly the time. It's exactly the time, Mother, William interrupted gently. My accident gave me perspective. Life is fragile, and legacy isn't about preserving wealth. It's about making a difference. The foundation will transition to a direct service model, with 90% of assets distributed over 5 years, as outlined in the proposal I circulated before my accident. Chaos erupted on screen and in the room. James was openly glaring now, while Eleanor looked as if she'd been struck. You can't do this, James hissed. The board won't approve. Actually, they will, William replied calmly. Because I still control 51% of voting shares, and because it's the right thing to do. He stood, surprisingly steady on his feet. That's all for today, ladies and gentlemen. My assistant will circulate the full proposal and will reconvene next week to discuss implementation. With that, he nodded to the tech team, who ended the call despite the board members' continued protests. The silence that followed was deafening. Have you lost your mind? Eleanor finally asked, her voice dangerously quiet. On the contrary, William replied. I've finally found clarity. You'll destroy everything your father built, she warned. I'll transform it into something he'd be proud of, William countered. Something that actually helps people instead of just helping ourselves. Eleanor's gaze flicked to Olivia, cold with accusation. This is your influence. No, Mother, William said firmly. This is who I've always been. You just refuse to see it. He held out his hand, and Olivia took it without hesitation. Now, if you'll excuse us, my doctor recommends fresh air as part of my recovery. They left Eleanor and James in stunned silence, making their way through the manor and out onto the cliffside path that led to the beach below. That was... Olivia searched for the right word. Terrifying? William suggested with a rueful smile. Exhilarating? Career suicide? Brave, Olivia decided, and probably long overdue. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the ocean breeze refreshing after weeks of sterile hospital room air. William moved slowly but purposefully, his hand warm in hers. What happens now? Olivia finally asked. Well, William considered. My mother will probably disown me. James will try to rally the board against me. The family lawyers will have collective heart attacks. Sounds messy, Olivia observed. Incredibly, he agreed cheerfully. But worth it. He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. The question is, what happens with us? Olivia hesitated. I'm still your employee, technically. Easily remedied, William said. You're fired. She laughed, despite herself. That's your solution? Step 1, he clarified, his expression growing serious. Step 2 is asking you to dinner. Not in the manor, not with my overbearing family, but somewhere normal. Just William and Olivia, seeing where this goes. And where do you think this goes? Olivia asked softly. William's smile was slow and full of promise. I don't know, exactly. But I do know that in 3 months of darkness, your voice was the only light I found. That has to mean something. The wind tousled his hair, making him look younger, freer. The man he perhaps had always wanted to be, not the heir to a fortune and a legacy. "I think," Olivia said carefully, "that sounds like the beginning of a very different story than the one we started with." "I'm counting on it," William replied, drawing her closer. "After all, every good story needs a twist." As their lips met again, with the ocean crashing against the cliffs below and the manor looming behind them, Olivia Bennett, formerly unemployed nurse, briefly billionaire caretaker, momentarily personal assistant, and now possibly billionaire, girlfriend, reflected that life really did have a wicked sense of humor, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Epilogue 6 months later. "Are you sure about this?" Olivia asked, surveying the modest apartment with its creaky floors and temperamental radiator. "It's a significant downgrade from a coastal mansion." William set down the last box of his belongings, mostly books, including a certain well-worn copy of The Princess Bride. "It's perfect," he declared, "and technically, I still own the mansion. I'm just letting my mother live there while she adjusts to her new reality." That new reality included Eleanor reluctantly serving on the restructured foundation board, alongside community activists and nonprofit leaders, while James had taken his golden parachute and started a tech venture that was already floundering. Meanwhile, William had recovered fully, physically at least. The memories of the night of his accident had never fully returned, though enough had come back to confirm it had indeed been an accident. A reckless night sail during a storm, driven by frustration after arguing with his family, but not the nefarious murder attempt he'd initially suspected. "The Montgomery millionaire forsakes fortune for love," Olivia read from a tabloid headline, smirking. "At least they got your alliteration right," William groaned, snatching the paper away. "Can we institute a no-tabloid rule in our apartment?" "Our apartment," Olivia repeated, still getting used to the idea. 3 months of dating like normal people, or as normal as possible when one half of the couple was front-page news, had led to this. Cohabitation in a decidedly non-Montgomery-esque neighborhood. "Having second thoughts?" William asked, a flicker of vulnerability crossing his features. "About the apartment?" "No," Olivia assured him. "About dating a man who still technically owns a yacht, a private jet, and controlling interest in half the real estate in Boston? Maybe occasionally." William pulled her close. "If it helps, the jet's being converted into a medical transport for the foundation, and the yacht is being sold to fund scholarships." "My hero," Olivia teased, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "You know," William murmured against her lips, "technically, you saved me first." "I've been meaning to ask," Olivia said, curiosity getting the better of her. "What finally made you wake up? Was it really hearing my voice all those weeks?" William's expression grew thoughtful. "Partly, but mostly it was realizing that I had something worth waking up for, a second chance to live differently, to be the person I wanted to be, not the person everyone expected." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his touch still sending the same thrill through her as it had the first time. "You showed me that was possible, just by being yourself. Honest, caring, unimpressed by the Montgomery millions." "The millions are a bit impressive," Olivia admitted with a grin. "But the man's better." As they stood in their perfectly ordinary apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and mismatched furniture, William Montgomery, former coma patient, reformed, billionaire, and current nonprofit crusader, reflected that sometimes the best wake-up calls came in unexpected packages, and sometimes, just sometimes, happy endings were real.